Welcome to Diabetes Day by Day, the American Diabetes Association's official podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is on the minds of many young adults and their parents this time of year, and that is preparing to head off to college. The transition to college life comes with a new level of independence, excitement, and many life changes. Moving to a different location, living with roommates or in a dorm. All of these are new learning experiences. Taking tough courses are some of the key aspects of heading off to college. Adding managing diabetes into this mix can pose some challenges. So we're here to talk about those challenges and how to plan ahead for them and what to do if and when those challenges arise. I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik, professor of family and community medicine in the Sidney Kimmel Medical College of Thomas Jefferson University, and joining me is my co-host.
I'm Dr. Sara Wettergreen, an assistant professor at the University of Colorado Skaggs School of Pharmacy and an ambulatory care clinical pharmacist.
Sara, we have some fantastic guests joining us today to share experiences and expertise on this topic. The first is Saige Megyeri, who is a fourth-year pharmacy student at the University of Colorado's Skaggs School of Pharmacy. Saige has type 1 diabetes and has transitioned not only to undergraduate school with diabetes, but now is in graduate school. Welcome, Saige.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm honestly just really excited for the conversations that we're going to have, and I can't wait to hear more.
And we're excited to hear about your experience and both successes and challenges. We also have two guests joining us from a national nonprofit organization called the Diabetes Link. Peyton Skoczylas is a senior program coordinator. She is a passionate disability advocate and lives with type 1 diabetes herself. Welcome, Peyton.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on. So excited to be here. I'm a senior program coordinator at the Link, and I've had diabetes for 16 years, so quite a while. And Becca and I really just want to normalize going to college with diabetes and having that experience.
So important. And Becca, from the Diabetes Link, Becca Burnett, she is a program coordinator and brings an international perspective after having grown up in Southeast Asia. She also lives with type 1 diabetes herself. Welcome, Becca.
Hi, thank you so much for having us on. I was diagnosed with diabetes 14 years ago, and I'm also a program coordinator at the Diabetes Link. We're really excited to be here today to give any of our expertise and guidance to help parents and guardians and young adults. We know this is a super new experience for everyone involved, so we definitely want to help you with our community networks and our personal experiences.
So important. Saige, let's start with you. Can you share a bit about yourself and your college experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. To start, we'll set the scene. I was born and raised in Colorado Springs, to be exact, so I'm a native. I graduated high school in 2017, and then I went to Colorado State University in Fort Collins and double majored in biology and in chemistry. I then decided to stay in Colorado yet again and started pharmacy school at CU Skaggs School of Pharmacy. I started in 2021. I am now a fourth year, and I'm starting to nail down my next steps, which will hopefully be a residency in pediatrics. So we'll see where that goes. As for my type 1 diabetes, I was diagnosed a little over 15 years ago when I was 10. I really don't recall life without it, honestly. I hit that point in my life where you could probably tell me that I was born with it, and I would probably believe you. I'm just so used to it at this point. And like I said, I don't remember life without it. Type 1 diabetes has honestly become a huge passion of mine for quite some time. I'm currently on rotation at the Colorado Children's Hospital in the endocrine clinic. So it's exciting seeing all these new little type 1 diabetes patients that are recently diagnosed and getting to share a little bit of my expertise in pharmacology as well as my own personal experiences. And so it's really neat to see it come full circle.
Saige, I'll bet just listening to you talk that while you have that expertise that you share, your comfort with how you manage things. I bet is something that people gain from. Am I correct there?
Neil, that's actually so you to say that because I think that's something I've actually prided myself in is that I bring a different sense of comfort to not only the patients that are recently diagnosed, but the families. I remember when I was diagnosed, I just remember my parents just being like, well, how does life continue? And how do you continue and go to college and all these things? And so I get excited going into these rooms and seeing these kids and showing off my Dexcom and just being like, I did it and you're going to do it and it's going to be great.
Now, Saige, what would you say is the core thing? You said your parents were worried, how is life going to continue? You didn't actually have that fear. What was it that let you move ahead the way that you did?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think for me, as well as a lot of my fellow friends that also have type 1 diabetes, a lot of our anxieties do come from our parents. And I think it totally depends on who you are in your core personality and characteristics. I've always been a super independent person, even as a young child. So when I was first diagnosed, I was always giving myself injections. My parents were never doing it. And I took the rings. And I think that helped me have a clear sense of this is just another thing. And we hear it all the time. Kids are resilient. And it is so true that I think as kids and adolescents, you're more positive in your outlook and you don't really know what else to think. And life is just going to be good and you're going to continue. So I think worries, for me, mostly came from my parents.
It's interesting. You used the word taking the reins, and I'd be interested to hear, Becca, from your point of view, in the way that you advise college students through the link, is taking the reins themselves something that you talk about? I think when I hear taking the reins, one of the things that comes to mind for me is self-advocacy.
Yeah, that's a great question, or I guess point, Neil. Thank you. From our perspective, a lot of the work that we do is the following the methodology of teach a man how to fish. We definitely are trying to set young adults up to be able to both ask for help because it's a condition where you need to ask for help and you need to learn when it's appropriate to ask for help and that advocating for yourself is necessary in a lot of different ways, both in a health perspective and to get accommodations that are necessary. But then also it's really important for people to be able to feel confident and competent in their ability to navigate the adult life. In college, like 4 years, it's really not a lot of time. So we definitely want to help people out during that stage of time by providing resources as much as possible. We let people take the reins, like you're saying, and give them that responsibility. But we also do want to set people up with the resources that they need because they're very hard to access. And depending on where you grew up or the environment you were in, it's almost impossible for people to have all the information that's out there. So we really just try to be the link that connects it all together, whether that's community resources.
And when you say resources, what type of resources?
Good question as well. So we have a lot of virtual resources on our resource hub on our website. So that's definitely a great place to check out if you're looking for something to consume more passively. We also have an Instagram account that's a great place to check out some of our more interactive social media where we're making posts about content, but we're also having more interactive discussion or interaction with our virtual community. We also have a Discord that people can check out if they want to interact in that community. Peyton, are there any other resources that you can think of that I'm missing? Because I know there are definitely a bunch. It's hard to remember all the programs themselves at times.
Yes, we do definitely have a lot of virtual resources. Like you're saying, we do also offer some in-person resources. One of the main programs that we're known for is our chapter network at colleges. So if you are at a college and you're looking for that in-person community, we can help you start a chapter of students like you. And then you can get that peer-to-peer support and use each other as a resource, essentially. And Becca and I were both part of college chapters as well and found that extremely beneficial. Definitely recommend that as well.
It definitely sounds like there are tons of resources to help you get prepared. And we're in this phase where many people are getting started in college right now. It might be a few weeks away. They're getting things together, getting prepared as best as possible. And as you alluded to, there's only so much you can do to get prepared. And this is a short time of life as well. So even if you've gone to college for the first year, finding more of these resources might be helpful. So, in thinking about that preparation, I'd love to start hearing a bit about the college experience that maybe Saige first can share, but certainly Peyton and Becca can share your experiences as well of how that transition went for you. So, Saige, if you don't mind starting us off, what was your transition to college the first time like? And were there some challenges and successes you might have experienced along the way?
Yeah. So challenges and successes for sure, probably many. Transitioning from high school to college is such an exciting time. I remember just being thrilled. But I know it's also really daunting for anyone, whether you have type 1 diabetes or not. College is new and it can be scary. I also think it can be pretty daunting for parents, as we talked about earlier. When transitioning to college, you're faced with new eating, new exercise routines, sleepless nights, and just a newfound sense of independence. And I think it's a lot for anyone to navigate. So throwing in a disease state like type 1 diabetes, I think that just adds such a bigger layer to everything. Overall, I think I managed my type 1 diabetes pretty good in college. And that's probably just due to the independence that I felt like I already had with my disease, as well as me not really remembering life without it. I've already accepted it and things like that since I was so young when I got it. But nonetheless, there were so many difficult times. Before I go any deeper, I think it's important that I set the scene for what life looked like for me in college because it's different nowadays, technology wise. So when I was in college, I was on a Medtronic pump and was still finger testing. So I did not have a CGM. And I think that's super important to mention, as that's probably going to be my biggest piece of advice and something that I wish that I had in college. So with that in mind, I think there was definitely some challenges I faced with that specifically. I remember one of my first few nights sleeping in college, so with a new roommate and everything. And I woke up with my heart beating fast and sweating bullets. And we've all been there. But of course, I thought I was dying. So then I climb out of bed and I stumble around trying to find something to treat my low. Luckily, my parents and I had set up the room, so that was like somewhat accessible. But for anyone that's been in a college dorm, you are on a giant bed and it's usually not very close to the ground. So you're trying to navigate off of that to then try to find something to treat your low, all while you're sharing a room with a stranger. Just a very interesting dynamic. And unlike home, where I would just be able to call out to my parents and be like, I'm low, help, pretty much. And they would be able to come into my room and bring me a juice box. And then they would come back and they would let me fall asleep and then they would recheck me in 15 minutes. Like suddenly I was on my own and I had to make sure that I was safe. And I think that was something I hadn't really thought of before.
That definitely
In
sounds like an overwhelming experience, Saige. I can only imagine that was that time, like you're saying, where the finger sticks made things a little bit more difficult, where parents often were checking their kiddo in the middle of the night. And that may have transitioned a bit as you grew up through high school, but then being fully independent in that, I imagine the first times that happened, you might have been a little nervous to go back to sleep. And then you're up in the middle of the night, worried about a roommate that you just met for the first time. But it sounds like the technology has made a difference for you. Can you share a little bit more about what CGM changed for you in that experience?
Oh my gosh. It is so funny. Even when I started pharmacy school, I didn't get on my CGM until I had gone through pharmacotherapy 2, which is our diabetes course. And everyone's talking about CGMs. We put one on for the first time. And I was like, I cannot believe I haven't used one. And I was such a why fix something that's not broken kind of person. And at the time, I said I was on a Medtronic pump. And with Medtronic CGM, you had to do calibration checks every day for it. And so I'm like, absolutely, I'm not wearing a CGM plus finger checking still. Then I transitioned to a tandem pump, and that opened up the doors to having a Dexcom CGM. So when I was in school and I got just a little 2-week trial of a CGM, I realized in those 2 weeks how much I learned about my diabetes. It opened up a whole new doors of what kind of different foods affected me differently. Coffee, I never realized coffee raised my blood sugar, and it does. Exercising. And then I also realized how much taking exams and having stress hormones in your body really affected my blood sugar. And it was something I didn't know until I had that data. And it's something I really wish I got on board with a lot earlier.
It's interesting as you're talking about that and being aware of resources. It really strikes me, Becca, something that you said and or Peyton about connecting with other people in your community, because no matter how much we read, no matter how much our healthcare professionals tell us about what's available, just hearing Saige, your story is so much more of a compelling reason to use CGM, of course, and gives one a sense of the promise of it. The other thing that strikes me, I just that idea of having a low when you're just meeting your roommate. And thinking back to when I was in college and how afraid I was of what other people thought of me, having that local support saying, hey, we all go through this, you'll be fine, and no one thinks the worst for you, we've all got something, is probably very important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess first I want to thank you, Sage, for sharing that because it is so scary also having diabetes when you're like super low in the middle of the night. And the roommate thing is like just a very hard thing to navigate. So I also have a follow-up question after what I'm about to say. And I'm just wondering, like, what conversations did you have with your roommate and how did that go? What were you expecting before? Like just candidly, like how did that go? And then the follow-up thing that I wanted to say after that, kind of bouncing around here, is that having the community is a hugely important aspect of having diabetes that I think once people find it, whether that's going to camp when they're younger or it's joining a chapter, having one diabetes friend when you finally get a little older, you like start realizing that day by day you're constantly facing small battles that someone else can actually understand, like truly understand. And it helps so much with your actual outcomes with your diabetes when you're able to talk to another person, just bounce off ideas and frustration with someone that gets it. So really, personally, I can't express how much like the diabetes community has helped me just have a chronic illness like this. And also another resource I want to point everyone towards is our chapter map, which is on our website. So if you want to find the community that is in your region, even if you're not actually part of college campus, you can reach out to them through the chapter map and that page if you want to get in contact in general, just to join that community, because it is hugely important. Anyway, Sage, if you want to answer that other question I asked.
Wow, Becca, you are somebody I wish I knew when I was in college. Even Sarah asked me earlier, have you ever heard of the diabetes link? And I'm like, I wish I had when I was that age, because that would have helped me a lot. You bring up such a good question of how did I have these conversations with my roommate? It depends. It depends. Do you already know your roommate or do you not? I did not know my roommate prior to us moving in. We found out maybe like a few weeks before we moved in of each other's names, and we were like texting. And I remember my mom being like, Saige, when are you going to tell her? And I'm like, I'm not. And she's like, what do you mean you're not going to tell her? And I'm like, it's going to just happen naturally when we're together. And my parents are so patient and kind. And I'm sure that drove them nuts, but they were just like, okay, you're going to figure it out. Sure enough, we start moving in and I am like hiding my pump. And I'm like, I don't want to do this right now. There's a lot going on. This can come up maybe in the next day or so as we're getting settled, as our parents leave and this and that. And all of a sudden, my mom walks in and goes, Haley, Saige is type 1 diabetic and you need to know this. And I wanted to pass out. I just was like, this has to be the worst way that this could have happened. Mom, you weren't supposed to do that. Retrospectively, I'm so happy that my mom did it because I can only imagine how long I would have waited and then how awkward it would have been theoretically that night that I woke up low and I'm scrambling around and she's looking at me like, what is happening? And so thank goodness my mom took the pressure off of me, as embarrassing as it was in the moment. It took away from me and my mom was able to just start the conversation. And it was easy. I don't know what I was afraid of. It was some
Parents listening, Saige, I really love that story. And for the parents listening, new strategy for you. Just go ahead and shout it out. No, but really, I think that bravery, Saige, that you're sharing of disclosing a diagnosis with a roommate, it can be a scary experience. And you're really learning how much benefit there is to having that information with somebody that hopefully you build a relationship with and trust, and even just to have some understanding. I try to think that most humans are compassionate, empathetic individuals who will understand if you're up in the middle of the night for an emergency, you're not trying to disturb their sleep. And I'm even thinking now with technology, if you have a CGM and the alarms are going off in the middle of the night, or you have a hyperglycemia alert, wanting your roommate to potentially be prepared for any types of sounds and just understand what's happening with that. And even thinking about with your hypoglycemia episode, Sage, you're making me think, do you teach your roommate how to administer glucagon? Do you bring that with you? Do you have it? There are so many different pieces to think about. I wonder, Peyton, if there are any strategies for meeting new people or having these new connections in college, the social experience that the diabetes link has any resources or recommendations for in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. So our number one recommendation is if you are going into college, to reach out to us, no matter where you're going, where you are in the country, because we have a huge chapter network of over 100 chapters. So chances are there's going to be a community at your school. And if there's not, we can help you start one. So you can go into it even before your freshman year, knowing that someone is there to help support you, to run over to your dorm in the middle of the night and bring you a low snack if you're out of something. So you're not having that moment where you're scrambling or you're like, I just feel so alone in this. Because it can be great to talk to your roommates and to have understanding roommates. Sometimes it is just a better experience to have another type 1 who understands that exactly what you're going through. So definitely reach out to us, take a look at our chapter map on our website, see if there is a chapter at the schools you're considering. We do also host some virtual programs called After College Sessions. So if you are a high schooler or a freshman or a parent and you have questions about things like accommodations and move-in day and roommates, we'll hopefully answer some of your questions on those sessions. So just connect with us. We really strive to be the number one diabetes organization for young adults. And we are here for you and we want to support you.
I'd love for each of you to share maybe a bit from your own personal experiences, but from your resources as well. What advice would you give to a young adult with diabetes who is going off to college for the first time, maybe in the next week, maybe next couple weeks? If they're listening to this episode, what's the main thing you'd want to give advice about? Maybe Saige, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think I have tons of advice, but if I narrowed it down to one, let's do two. One, I'll be quick. Get a CGM if you don't have one. I'm on my hot topic about that. Number two, learn from me and just be open and honest about your diabetes and advocate for your needs. I think it's super important. And I think as time goes, you realize that it's really not that big of a deal and that people don't act weird about it. And it's just another thing. And as Sara mentioned earlier, a lot of people are very empathetic and compassionate. And I think it's fun for people to learn about if they already hadn't known anything, and just rip the Band-Aid off sooner than later. Don't be like me and want to wait. I don't even want to imagine what that would have turned into if I waited. I also think there's easy ways to bring it into the conversation. I think one of my main ways I bring it into conversation now is by simply going onto my Dexcom app in front of people and just like showing them, and they're like, oh, what is that? What are those arrows? What are those numbers? And then I can just immediately go into the conversation and it's fun. It's, oh my gosh, this tracks my blood sugar. I'm a type 1 diabetic, yada, yada, yada. And then I think with friends in college, you also can make it super fun. If you're having a low and eating candy, we'll give them a piece and they're going to be excited also with you. So there's just tips and tricks to be more open about it and have more pride about it.
I think you're such a positive person at baseline, Saige, and that really comes through in how you approach your diabetes. And I'm hoping some listeners are feeling inspired by how you've handled the difficulties and some of the awkward situations that might come up at times. Becca, let's go to you next.
Thank you, Saige, for what you said as well. I'm going to definitely echo what Sara just said. And also the point that you're making about you having a community outside of even the diabetes community is a great thing to remind people of. Everyone has stuff. Everyone's coming to college with stuff that they're thinking about and worrying about. And it really is up to you to decide how much you're like comfortable advocating and talking about your diabetes, but definitely like knowing that there is community for you in and out of the diabetes space. Yeah.
Thanks, Becca. Peyton, we'll go to you next.
Yeah. So also thank you, Saige and Becca, for what you've all said. Going to echo that as well, that it is so important to find community. That is, to me, the number one thing that got me through those moments when I felt alone in college. And I'm also going to recommend, just in general, if you're getting ready to go to college, to set yourself up for success. Sometimes it can be easy to pretend that you don't have a disability and that you don't need extra support. But I found that accommodations were super helpful to me in school, just getting me through really difficult final exams, making sure I had a separate room where I could take my tests and treat blood sugars if I needed to. So definitely recommend just setting yourself up for success academically, as well as making sure that you're connecting with that community and finding a social outlet for your diabetes.
Peyton, when you say accommodations and you mentioned tests, are there any, can you say a little more about that? Because I think everyone is different and some people actually do need specific break time to be planned. Some people don't. But can you talk a little bit more about what some accommodations might be, when to ask about that, and who one might address questions to?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'll say is that the Diabetes Link does host an opt-to-college session on accommodations, and we partner with a really great organization called Children with Diabetes. Lee Fickling is the spokesperson that we usually have, and she has worked in higher education. So she's got a lot of expertise on accommodations and when to talk to your disability services office and things of that nature. So definitely recommend watching our session on that. It's on our resource hub. For me personally, in terms of accommodations that I found helpful, I did use a stop the clock accommodation where I would be sitting in the testing room. And then if I felt funny or noticed my blood sugar going low, I would literally just pause, walk away from my test, eat fruit snacks, and come back when I felt better. I also was able to keep my phone in the room with me on a side table so that I could monitor my Dexcom if it started beeping. And I had my own testing room as well. So all of that was super helpful, just made me feel more confident knowing that I wouldn't be distracting other students while testing, and also just knowing that I would be able to monitor everything. But yeah, every student is different. So definitely do some research on the accommodations that your school offers and see what works for you.
Excellent. Any other thoughts there, Becca?
No, not really. We have the Instagram Live coming up in the next few months as well, going to be about accommodations. And we have a topic launch too. Generally, we often do have this topic like flowing through our channels.
So helpful. We're about out of time, and I just want to make sure we have time left for any final thoughts that each of you would like to share. Peyton, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a really great conversation. I guess just in terms of final thoughts, if you're a high schooler or freshman getting ready to go off to college, you can do it. It is possible. You have your community, you have your support already, probably in your parents and your friends. And there are additional friends and additional support for you to find once you get on campus. We all know diabetes comes with its challenges, but college is a challenging new experience anyway, and also a very exciting new experience. You can do it and you're going to do great.
Hey, and Peyton, it's so helpful hearing the resources that are available that you went over through the diabetes link. Becca, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah. So I think, again, like what Peyton is saying, I completely agree. I think we're here for you. So definitely reach out to us if you need help. And we also definitely want to share your story and your experience with diabetes. So any way that you're interested in getting involved with our organization, we do also want to share your story. And we also want to, hear from you what resources you need or like how we can better support you with events or programming. So yeah, definitely reach out to us. We're here.
And Saige, we started with you talking about your experience and how you could barely remember even when you didn't have diabetes, and going to college was another step on your journey. Any thoughts from all of that experience that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Gosh, I think I'm just feeling grateful that I've gotten to talk to all of you. I think this was so great. Becca and Peyton, all the resources you guys are providing, I think, are invaluable to people. And I think they're going to be invaluable to not only students, but to parents, and going to bring a lot of ease during these seasons of transitions. And one thing about diabetes, the transitions are never going to stop. You're going to transition into another school or into, another city, another job, and the transitions are never going to end. And so just working with how best to advocate for yourself and to get through those weird transition phases.
Fantastic. Sara, your thoughts?
I loved hearing this conversation today. And Saige, as your teacher, I learned so much more about your diabetes experience. So thanks so much for sharing that. And in my role as a faculty, I would say one thing that I just want to reemphasize is the accommodations piece. I think that's so important in terms of how you advocate for yourself. And if you're having trouble figuring out the process or navigating the resources that you have available on campus, work directly with your student services office or related resources so that they can help direct you to the right place to advocate for those accommodations. If you need them, you should request them.
It's so important. As I'm listening to all of us talk, and I love, Saige, the word you use, grateful. That's how I feel right now, having talked to everybody. And that sense of gratitude often, in my experience, allays a sense of fear that we all have with transitions, with new things that come up, and to be able to have the honesty and courage to move ahead and also to rely on each other. The supports available through the Diabetes Link are so important. The resources that Peyton, that Becca, you alluded to, the ability, Peyton, I love that there is the ability that you facilitate to connect with other students at your school, because as much as perhaps us as care providers try to do, there's nothing like having a peer who's been through it to help you through it. For our listeners, really make use of the resources. They will be in the links that are available. If you look at the show notes on your podcast platform or on ADA's platform, Saige, Becca, Peyton, and of course, Sara, thanks everybody for your contributions. And as always, most of all, thank you to our audience for listening. If you're someone preparing to head off to college, make use of those resources. And for everybody, join us next month, where we're going to be discussing another important topic, and that's nutrition. For the American Diabetes Association, I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik, and thanks for listening.